I am now so incredibly thrilled and honoured to introduce Venerable Dr Pannavati Bhikkhuni, who is joining us online from North Carolina in the United States. It is so exciting that we have Venerable Dr Pannavati. She is the founder of Hearthood Refuge. She is also the abbot of Embracing Simplicity Hermitage. Venerable Dr Pannavati is a proud Black female Buddhist monk ordained in the Theravada and Mahayana traditions with Vajrayana empowerments and transmission. Venerable Dr Pannavati has dedicated her life to social justice advocacy, supporting and advocating the rights of people who are the most marginalised, abused and neglected in our societies. Her social justice work and advocacy has been both local and also global. Every time I listen to Venerable Dr Pannavati, I can feel my heart open. Thank you so much for being here. What a blessing it is to listen to you, to learn from you. Over to you, Venerable. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, do I close this screen? Okay, great. It's so wonderful to be with you again. So today, I think I'm going to talk a little differently than maybe how everybody else does. I don't know about Proud Black Woman, but what I do know is that I am a cultivator. I'm a cultivator of the Buddha Dharma. Buddha studies is not the same thing as Buddha Dharma. Yes, we do need to study, but there is something else that is required. You know, one has to enter into a particular state to be able to function with the accomplishments of that state. And if you're not there in body, speech, and mind, then you'll just be talking. And so today, I know that there are many of us who want to know how to increase our compassion. To do that, you have to actually know what compassion is. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about what our nature is, our original nature, and how we are compassionate, but until we realize that state, the good we would do, we can't do, and what we don't want to do, we often do. And so there first has to be an agreement that that we recognize that we have the same original nature as all the Buddhas and the bodhisattvas in the 10 directions. As Shakyamuni Buddha, we have that nature. But until we actually realize it, we cannot walk in the accomplishment of it. There's a song that we used to sing when I was a Christian Baptist, and the song said something like, heaven, heaven, everybody's talking about heaven. You know, I got shoes, you got shoes, all God's children got shoes. And when I get to heaven, I'm gonna put on those shoes and walk around heaven all day. And so we can think that we're operating or functioning in a functional kind of compassion if we don't really know what compassion is. And if it's not drawing from the wellspring of our direct experience and understanding. So I'd like to talk about an example that my Buddha master gave us to ponder. He said, suppose you drive down the street and you see someone and they were injured. There was a car accident and they're hurt. And like, oh, there's such horror. You know, you think about what has happened to that person and you say a little prayer, you know, for his safety and his well-being, and then you go on home, you know, and then when you get home, you think about it a little bit more because you actually saw something that can't be good. You might not have seen the person in the wreck, but you saw that wreck and you were touched by it in your being. Then you get home and you start tending to the kids and husband or your wife's on their way home, and you start preparing dinner, and you say, guess what, honey, I saw this accident today. It looked really bad, and my heart just went out to them. Oh, how was your day? And then you start talking about something else, and that's the end of it. And so I would ask you, what is the capacity of that kind of compassion? And where does it top out, or where does it bottom out? And we think, oh, we're such loving and compassionate people. I even pulled over to the side and said a prayer for him. And then I went on with my regular life. But suppose that had been your family member, or suppose that had been your child. Forget about suppose it was you. Suppose it was just someone close to you. How long would you think about it? What would you do? Would you stop and try to help? How long would it rest with you if that was your family, or if that was you? A lot longer than just driving by, having some kind of limping along compassion for people. Now I'm just doing straight talk now, right? Because we want to improve, we want to get better, and we need to know the methods by which we can do that, and we need to know the mindset that we have to be able to do that. So that's an example of when we have like ordinary compassion. It's tied into our feelings about things, and mostly it's tied into how I would feel if I was in that situation, but it's really not so much for the other person, for that person who's undergoing that. There's like a symbiotic relationship of, you have feelings that you could sympathize or empathize with that, but that is not the powerful kind of compassion that is available to us when we enter into certain states of reality. And so that's what I want to talk about, how we can move from these states, particularly if we're just talking about the four Brahma Viharas, loving kindness, which uproots our anger with people, compassion, which helps us to not have a sense of hatred, and the how the intent to do harm rises before you can catch it and pull it back in the gate. I'm going to give you an example of how I experienced that just yesterday, which completely changed my Dharma talk that I had planned to give today. We can planning is good, we should plan, but I think that there's a more perfect way to know how to enter into the moment. Then there is loving kindness, you have compassion, you have altruistic joy in the successes of others, even your enemies, even people who may be trying to do something to harm you. Can you really be happy when something that has been rightfully earned and deserved by them comes to fruition in their life? And then you have what we generally call equanimity, but I call that a boundless generosity. And so it's magnanimous, it's far-reaching, it has no limit. Do you have a limit? It has no limit. And so these four essences or aspects of compassion, and one of them, starts. Last night, this is my starting tonight. I guess at midnight is my first day of a solitary retreat. I'm out in California, actually, and I was getting my cabin, all set up and organized, and setting up my altar and all of this. I'm like in like just a high state, all ready to go into this deep meditation practice, and I saw a bug run across the floor, and I'm going to do a lot of practice sitting on the floor. So I was thinking maybe I could just capture this bug and move it outside, and then I wouldn't be looking around and wondering where he is when I'm trying to meditate. So that's what I did. I attempted to catch it, but this was a fast little bugger, and he would move so fast that I couldn't catch him. So I said, okay, I'm going to go and get a broom and see if I can sweep them out. The problem is that the lip of the door is about 5 inches, so you couldn't just sweep him out. You had to sort of like pick him up and usher them over the threshold. So I tried that a couple of times unsuccessfully. And I said, okay, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to get back. He's starting to move towards where my bed is. I'm going to get back and I'm going to take the broom and I'm going to do like an upswing, almost like a golf swing that will propel him over that little threshold because he's too fast for me to catch. And I thought I had done that. So I was like, oh, that's really good. I didn't kill this bug, but I just really think that the two of us are not going to be able to coexist for the next 10 days if I want to accomplish something. And so that's what I did. Now, when I got up this morning, and I felt really good about it too, that I didn't kill the bug or I didn't, I just really wanted to give it its own place, and I didn't realize how much of an aversion I have to bugs. So when I got up this morning, there were hundreds of ants all around the threshold and right at my Kuan Yin altar. And when I looked carefully, closely, I saw that it was the bug I thought I swept out last night and propelled over the threshold. But actually, I killed it. And all of a sudden, I felt the consequence of my action. There would have been a time I would have just said that those types of bugs and humans, they can't peacefully coexist because they bring dangers to us. And that would have been it. You just have to do what you have to do. But my heart sank when I realized that I had killed that harmless bug. But it wasn't just the feeling or the realization. I saw something. I saw what made me basically attack it. I saw the fear that I had. I saw the how I was actually frantic in trying to capture it, chasing it all around the room. I saw all of those things in a flash, in a way that I had never seen it before. Now I'm just talking about it now, but I'm saying to you that if we're going to grow and develop in our virtues, we have to enter truly into a state that we recognize both the consequences and the helps that we bring to every situation. And most of us are really oblivious to that. We just have an ordinary kind of compassion. But it takes more than an ordinary kind of compassion. The practice of the four limitless states of mind is divided into 3 different stages. The first is the generation stage, the second is the completion stage, and the third is the oneness of generation and completion. So to attain accomplishment in the four limitless states of mind, you, of course, should at least reach the first stage, right, which is the generation stage, and you should also reach the completion stage. But the ultimate compassion is when there's a combination of these two. And I think that we all can meet it. We think we have our limits, but only by reaching that stage of oneness of generation and completion can we really correspond with whatever Dharma, like this is the practice of compassion. So that's the Dharma of compassion. That's only in that way can we actually meet in reality the Dharma of that practice. And so it was a shock for me last night going in, and then right away I did my mantras and my mudras on raising the consciousness of the dead. And I'm like, do I think I can actually do that? No, I don't. But I'm seasoning the mind to go the full spectrum of the practice of compassion, not just an ordinary compassion, but the compassionate that is consummate in its true identification with the suffering of living beings. Now, here's the thing about that. In the beginning, we are very much tied into it because of our feelings, how we feel about things. And more of our compassion is around how we identify than the actual compassion for other living beings. It's like, so if your dog died, then if I had a dog that died and your dog died, I can identify with that. If my husband left me and yours left you, I can identify with that. If I lost my job and you lose yours, I can identify that with that, because there are feelings that are associated with that. And so I'm tapping into my feelings, and I can commiserate with you. But there is a little bit further that we have to go than that. I mean, that's good. That's a training. It's a guideline. It's a method, because that's what allows our mind to change, our understanding to deepen, our capacity to expand, our heart. We use the word heart because it sort of describes what is the total me, the aspect of me that's more than just what I think. It's my life. It's how I understand life. So there's more to it than just following rules, more to it than just going through exercises, more to it than just developing methods, more to it than just saying, may I be well and happy, peaceful, and everybody else too. More to it than that, to enter into the reality of it. So my talk today was on the practice of non-practice and how you the step by step get into that. And when it becomes non-practice is when you're not thinking that you're practicing, when you're not thinking, oh, I'm a good person, I'm a compassionate person, I'm a kind person, when there's no thought of me being good, when there's no thought of me being kind, when there's no thought of me being compassionate. When whatever comes into my hand, I don't think of it even as my own. But when it comes into my hand, if I use it, if I need it, I use it. But if I don't need it, I pass it to somebody who does need it. I remember my Sangha members would be so upset because they like to buy me gifts, And they buy you a gift, and it's a really nice gift, and it's coming in my right hand, going to my left hand, and I'm passing it off to somebody. And they get so upset because, they bought that for me. But compassion doesn't feel that way. It's like wherever the need is. And first of all, you have to have some clarity and vision to know when there really is a need. And all of that is found as we do these practices and we move to the different states that are in correspondence with whatever Dharma we're practicing. So if you're practicing compassion light, then you're going to reap the benefits of compassion light, and you're going to be limited in your capacity to save living beings. If you're practicing compassion middling, then you're going to be able to do a little bit more, but there's still that selfish component there. And bodhisattvas have no thought about themselves. So even not what a good person am I? And that can be a real trap for us when we start thinking that we're good. But when we get to the place that there is no self-aggrandizement, one's not even thinking about goodness. One is just only seeing the situation, having the wisdom to know the response that should be made, the action that should be taken up, and to be able to do that, irregardless of feelings, how you feel about it, and sometimes regardless of how someone else feels about it. We have friends, and friends friends who will support them, and we should support our friends, but sometimes you have to tell your friend no. You have to speak the truth in order to save your friend. But most of us will capitulate because the friendship is so important to us, and friendship is important, but it should be one that's based on virtue. And so sometimes we don't do the things that we should do because we're trying to maintain our relationships, or we're trying to be a good friend to a friend. But sometimes we have to. The best way we can be a good friend is to tell a friend the truth. So compassion is not always pretty. Compassion is not always like, glowing, and compassion is hard work. And compassion takes some deep looking, deep introspection. Compassion requires us, first of all, to get radically honest with ourselves, and that can be very difficult for a person to really, really look at themselves, especially since we've spent our whole life, or since we've been Dharma followers, we've spent that time trying to be better, look better, act better. And that is a type of efforting, but it's not the kind of efforting that's going to really make us better. The kind of efforting that we need is that our karmas should just naturally be in correspondence with loving kindness and compassion and sympathetic joy and boundless or non-differentiating generosity. That's the key word. Sometimes just shifting a word can help one to penetrate the power of the teachings more. So if I say non-differentiating generosity instead of equanimity, it gives a little more substance to it. Non-differentiating, meaning I don't see you any different than me, your child any different than mine, your neighborhood any different, your country any different than mine. I don't see any different. Non-differentiation is a key element. I differentiated last night. There was the bug, that's a living being, sentience, I'm pretty sure it feels pain, and there was me, I was the big one, it was the little one. It ran everywhere trying to escape. You can call it impulse if you want, but when I'm running trying to escape, I call it fear because, I'm being terrorized, or there is something rising up in me. I don't know whether bugs have fear or not, but what I do know is that they have sentience, that they are alive, just like me. So I have to find a way to remove them from the presence if it's detrimental to me, or I have to find a way to peacefully coexist. And that's the kind of mind that we have to develop if we want to really see the benefit of our practice. Otherwise, we'll just go through with all the whole tick list. We can say all the words, we know all the theory, but that's not living it out. And so the Buddha encourages us that we can go beyond theory. He encourages us that we can go beyond just merely saying the right words to learn. Everybody knows their Buddhist jargon of their particular sect or their particular group. We know all the things to say in front of people like, wow, she's deep in the Dharma, or whatever, but we have to go beyond that if we want. And the only way to go beyond it is to go beyond it in our speech, go beyond it in our conduct. And the conduct is what actually bears witness to whatever understanding is really coming through. And we know our attainment by virtue of our conduct. And so these practices that we do, important, yes, they are important. They're important because they put us on a track or a trajectory. They give us a certain attitude of mind. Sometimes it's a self-correction. Sometimes it's an encouragement to be bolder, but that is not the thing. That's not the reality. The reality is when we are actually walking them out without any thought of I am doing anything. And so I ask you today, if where are you on your bodhisattva scale? Are you at that beginning stage where you think that if you talk about it and you think about something for a minute, that but not going through it in such a deep way that you see clearly Actually, I had a kind of, I guess you could say it was a kind of holy fear that arose. Different than the fear I had of the bug, but I had a true sense that has forever changed me. That's what I'm saying. I passed through some barrier last night. I'm all getting ready for this retreat. I'm going to do this deep introspection and study and all of that. And then that happens. And I looked and I saw how fear rose up in me, afraid of that bug. I also saw how it brought back to my mind some thoughts I had from the time that I was a child, that bugs in your house means you're filthy or whatever. I saw, but in a flash, I saw all of it that made me react in that way with so much force that I crushed and broke its body and took its life. You can say, well, Pannavati, you're going overboard now, but what I'm saying to you is I was touched in the way we talk about saving all living beings. We talk about wanting to be bodhisattvas. Some of us talk about we are bodhisattvas. And what is your standard for that? What is your real mind? What is the mind of reality around your compassion? And how long does it last compared to how you take care of your own family? I used to take in foster kids. We were foster parents, and some of those kids had such horrible, horrible lives. And I would give them more graces than I gave my own kids because I raised them. I know them. But when they came in from other circumstances and environments, I had to consider, their life. I had to consider, what understanding they had. I had to consider abuses that were committed against them. I had to consider what they never had, and so I would make allowances based on how much I understood about the life of that child. And one day my kids came to me complaining, said, like, we have a beef, Mom. She said, like, you won't let us do this, or this, but you let them do that. And I began to explain to them how, what was the measure by which, I allowed certain activities, or what was the grace that I gave them and why. And it actually changed my children. At first they were resentful, but then they could begin to understand how blessed they really were, to be born in a family where they were loved, where they had food on the table, where they didn't have to wonder if they were going to be beaten every evening when they got home from school, whether they're going to be locked in a basement or what. And in that way, they learned compassion through just the action, the observation of having other kids come and stay with us. And so I didn't have to really teach them so much. They learned it by observation, and they learned it in such an ordinary way that their hearts just open up. It's difficult to teach things, and you have let's say that you really have an objection to them, and you're trying to learn it, but honestly, in your heart of hearts, you just don't agree with that. I mean, some may feel that way about me talking about killing a bug. Like, what's the big deal? And how long are we going to talk about this? But what I'm trying to point out is that sometimes it's better to just go through an experience, reflect upon it, and see where it touches you. And that's how you can know how you're advancing, or whether you're even advancing. Are you the same as you were last year? I won't even go back 5 years, just last year. The last 3 years have been so difficult for everyone. We have a global pandemic. Things changed drastically in people's financial pictures. Some, from being at home all the time, all kinds of behaviors came out. People lost their jobs, people were sick, family members died. Some of them didn't even get to, there couldn't even be a funeral because They felt that the body was contaminated and you couldn't get. So there's been a lot of stress over the last couple of years. Now things are getting somewhat better. People are globally recovering somewhat. But why is there so much angst then and trepidation in the world? Why is there so much fear? We have these lingering feelings tied to those years of sickness, imminent death, separation from loved ones. And some were confined with loved ones and decided they didn't like them as much as they thought they did, and so all of these things are happening in our life, but what do we do about them? The only thing we can do is go to the sutras. The sutras give us the understanding of principles of reality. We ponder them even when we disagree with them. We continue to ponder them, and then all of a sudden, one day, it's like being on a seesaw, and you have one view and Dharma has another view. You say it doesn't take all that, but nevertheless, you keep reading what the Dharma says, and you reach this little critical point where one starts to tip or incline one's mind in a certain way beyond what you ever thought you could do. One of my family members was killed by the Peeping Tom serial killer, and of course, when they caught him, they wanted the death penalty for him. And I was the only one in the family that was against the death penalty. So of course now everybody in the family is against me. I didn't, I said, like, we're trying to kill him for killing somebody. I said, this man is obviously, mentally incapacitated. And I'm not saying that he should be out on the street, but I'm not for the death penalty. And so it ended up that he did not get the death penalty. And it took about 5 years for my family to forgive me, for not standing up for family over this man. But I tell you, you can come to these places that you have a non-differentiating generosity towards all living beings, even animals, even insects. And when that happens, when something opens for you like that, you know that you are advancing in the true Dharma, just not our Dharma speak. We have a lot of Dharma speak. We like to keep it, and we set the bar compared with each other, but the standard is the Buddha's wisdom and the Bodhisattva's compassion. That's the standard. And if you don't know that standard, how are you gonna walk in it? How are you gonna evaluate yourself? How are you gonna improve yourself? If I compare myself to you, I might be doing okay. I compare myself to you, I might need a little work, but maybe not as much as if I compare myself to the mind and the heart of a Buddha or of a Bodhisattva. So I love when there are different teachings that speak of the mind of a Buddha, that speak of the mind of a Bodhisattva. And those are the ones that we can investigate. And then when we go into meditation, we have a different, I guess you could say, we aspire to a different state, a greater state. We set the bar higher. We've come to find out I can have that same mind, and I want to have that same mind. And so our happiness grows, it develops as we generate these feelings of loving kindness and of compassion and of altruistic joy and of non-differentiating generosity, seeing others as oneself. And so there are many practices. I don't do all the practices. There are some specific practices that I do. One is seeing all living beings as my own mother. Now, that was a difficult practice for me because my mother had issues and I had issues. And it took a lot for me to actually have gratitude for her one time I was talking with one of my Dharma teachers, and he said, well, if you didn't get along well with your mother, you could at least be glad that that she raised you and she fed you, even if she didn't love you in the way you wanted to be loved, and they said, well, I said, you got to keep coming, you got to give me more than that. And then he said, well, you should be glad. And he finally got down to that, and she birthed you. At least she didn't abort you. I said, well, she tried, it just wasn't successful. I mean, I had no good thing I can say. But over the years of doing these practices, listening to the pithy sayings, like of what the mind of the Tathagata is, and what the mind of a Buddhist, that kind of mind stream, how they think and how they respond to the world, my mind began to shift. It began to sweeten. I began to recognize that to act in a certain way, there are certain things that had to have occurred in your life, maybe in this life, maybe in a previous life, and that's just in the mind stream. But there had to be something that occurred for one to act in that way, one to think in that way, one to not have an understanding about certain things. And so I began to soften and say to myself, she must have really suffered, to be able to even think of me in this way or treat me in this way. And I lost the sadness I had that, if she had really known me, she would have known how much I could have loved her, and so now it's too late. Mother's dead. And yet I'm still processing this. And my mind starts to shift and change. And how I wish today that I could tell her how I feel about her now. So you can't cry over spilled milk, but you can't go forward and not make the same mistakes over and over. You can cultivate a mind, a true mind of loving kindness. We can cultivate a heart of true compassion. We can have joy in the successes of others, even when they are our enemy. And we can develop a boundless generosity towards them. And my master would always say that it starts with boundless generosity. We have to open wide the gate, and those others just kind of slip in through that open gate. And so there are the teachings, there are the principles, so that we can have a right view, and not a limited view, but an expansive view of ultimate bodhicitta. Just not relative bodhicitta, but ultimate bodhicitta. And as we go through these stages of hearing, we call that language prajna. So language prajna takes you from ignorance, not knowing, to knowing. It creates a bridge where one can know something and set up a lens through which they can look and understand life and question things and hold things in their mind. And as they do that, they begin to have more understanding, illumination, light shines on the teachings, and that mind becomes your mind. Whatever you think and ponder on becomes the inclination of your mind. The Buddha said one time he went to one of his communities, and they were arguing about something. He said, monks, you shouldn't quibble and argue like that. They said, oh, leave us alone. We got this. So he let it go. The next day they were still arguing and fighting. He again admonished them. They told him, Buddha, we got this. He went the third time, and again he was not able to make them try to come together in peace and harmony. So he got his bowl and his robe, and he went on down the road. When he got down the road, he encountered another group of his disciples, and And he asked them, well, how are you all getting along? They said, oh, we're blending like milk and water. He said, yeah, well, how do you do that? He says, well, you know, when we get up in the morning, whoever gets up the earliest takes care of the morning chores. Somebody else goes out for arms round. The one who's later sets the table, and the one who's so late that we've already eaten the food just cleans up. He didn't say, you didn't save me any. If I wasn't there, I didn't get it. That's it. And he just cleans up. He says, good, good. He said, and how is your meditation going then? He said, it's going good. He said, well, tell me how it is, tell me how you all are relating to each other. He said, well, you know, I think what a boon it is in life for me to have this good friend in the Dharma here. And so if he wants to do something, I think, why should I do what I want to do? Why not do what he wants to do? Just out of appreciation for him being in my life. He said, and then I do what he wants to do instead of what I want to do. Now I'm talking about the kind when you're getting upset because somebody's not doing what you want, your husband's not treating you the way you want to be treated, and the kind of animosity that's building up inside. This is right where we live, you see. And so he tells you how to work on shifting that that situation. So he says, so this is the way I think. Now, so then he said, and great, and how is that showing up in your meditation? He said, oh, our meditations are wonderful. You know, we sit down, we see forms and visions of forms. We see light, we see this, and we see that. We see, and he says, well, what is, and then what happens is, but then it all disappears. And the Buddha said, well, what's the reason for that? He said, we don't know. And the Buddha said, well, you should understand the reason. Like he said, while I was yet an unenlightened bodhisattva, I too had visions. I saw forms and I saw light. And he talked about all the experiences he had in his meditation. He said, and then like you, they would disappear. I'd go from that elevated state of mind to an ordinary state of mind. And all my ragtag thinking would come back. And so he said, well, he said, and I said to myself, what is the cause of this? And he said, and when I reflected deeply, I reflected honestly. I realized different states were arising in my mind. Sometimes it was sloth and torpor. Sometimes it was anger. Sometimes, you know how you'll be talking, maybe sharing something about somebody, and you don't mean to talk negatively about them. You're just in a conversation. And then you think about something that they did that wasn't so good, wasn't so nice. And now you continue to talk, but there's a little tinge in your talk because you've now flavored it with a little bit of dissatisfaction about them. It becomes a whole different conversation. And I used to work with that with myself. You know, you go to the water cooler at the water break because whoever wasn't there, that's the one who's going to be talked about. You know, so you made sure that you were at the water coolers so it wouldn't be you. And one day I was doing that, and I'm reading these trainings on how to train the mind and how to develop you know, a goodness on a very, very deep level. And I was right in the middle of talking about somebody, and it started off good. And then I remembered one day she stole one of my clients. And then, you know, we didn't make a big deal about it, but I never forgot it. And all of a sudden, something in the intention around my conversation began to be not quite as nice. It's like I'm outing her without really outing her, you know, deliberately outing her. And then my aspiration popped up. It just welled up out of my heart, hit me in my face. And I said, excuse me, I'm gossiping now. And I excused myself and I went back to my desk. And if we take up these practices in this kind of way, we will see real change in our life, real change I'm talking about, not just talking empty theories, but we will actually transform because the mind of the Tathagata is our original nature. It's been covered up for so long, all of these many lifetimes, eons and eons, but it doesn't mean that this can't be the life that you awaken to your Buddha nature. And so we have to go a little bit deeper. And I'm encouraging you to do that. There's many references that you can use. One of them that I like a lot is the 37 practices of the bodhisattva. And it gives 37 things to consider and ponder of how well we do it. First, it tells you what how a bodhisattva thinks. You know, it says the sons. When they say the sons, they don't mean just the males. That just means the descendants. You know, the sons of the Buddha all practice this way. And just to read it in that kind of way, the sons of the Buddha all practice this way. Helps me even when I don't like what I read, because it's going to require something of me. It's going to require patience on my part. It's going to, you know, I'm going to have to take an action, and I really want them to get their act together and fix their things so that I can be okay. But this is saying, forget about them. What will you do? How in this situation, what will you do? And it can be challenging, but every time you do and you have some success with it, one becomes stronger and stronger. One begins to recognize that underneath all of this, there is a Buddha nature that can come up to the surface, and we can make a difference in the world. So I think they've switched my screen, so that might mean my time is up. If whoever's facilitating gives me a yes on that, I think it was 45 minutes.
Venerable Dr. Pannavati, we are on time, so if you approach the end of your Dharma talk, we would be very grateful. Thank you.
So I have approached the end. I'm asking you, what is your standard? You know, are we going to compare ourselves to each other? Or are we going to compare ourselves to those that we truly consider wise, and we're trying to build a life of realization, of no suffering, of no accumulation, of no cessation, and ultimately of no path? You know, he started off with the Four Noble Truths. There is the truth of suffering. No, suffering has a cause, and through causality, one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. So that's the accumulation, right? But there is a way out of suffering, and I can show you the path. So when we come down to the end of our Dharma life, we shouldn't still be talking about, you know, the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering, you know, and its cause and its cessation and its path. We should be talking about or having the realization of no suffering, no accumulation. So there's nothing that needs to cease. And actually, that's not even a path, because there is not even really a sense of this separate I. And that's my hope for us coming out of the darkness of the COVID era, that when we have extraordinary challenges and situations, I think grace does equally, or maybe even much more, abound. And so even in times like this, we have a way of escape. We have a way of being and living in the world that can be a model and an example for others. And we have a way of liberating and freeing our mind if we'll enter into the truth of the teachings and set our sights on the goal. When we and I am really closing now, you know, whenever we're practicing in any kind of sport, you know, I guess we do practice, but at some point, you know, you want to get out in the real game. So don't think so much of all forever practicing, but one wants to get on the field of life. And I'm looking forward to each and every one of you investigating in these deeper ways that we can truly be the change that we're looking for in the world. The world needs us right now.
Thank you so much. Respects, gratitude. Venerable Dr. Pannavati Bhikkhuni.